So welcome to our Service Learning webinar to talk a little bit more about enhancing your 4-H clubs with service. The first thing we're going to do is take a quick poll. And if you could just take a few seconds and type in the chat box one project that you have done that you feel is service learning, either in your clubs, at your site, or on your own. Anybody out there? Oh, there we go. Okay. Healthy Habits Chili Cook-Off. Oh, that's a good one. Does anybody else have anything to add? Any service projects that you've done in the past, or maybe one that you're planning? Hi, Carol. Thanks for joining us. What we're doing right now is just typing in the chat box one project that we consider to be a service learning project that we've done either in clubs, at a site, or on our own. Ooh, community cleanup off base, that's a really good one. So as we go through the presentation today, whichever service project you have in mind that you've either typed or want to share with us, just keep that project in mind as we talk. And we'll kind of revisit these at the end and check in to see if maybe we could enhance those with some of the service learning principles that we're going to talk about. So the first question is, what is service learning? So what's the difference really between community service and service learning? There's kind of three ways to do work in the community. So there's one, volunteerism, and just refers to people who choose to do something good or some kind of service without pay. The second is community service, and it's volunteering done basically in the community. Some examples might be participating in a food drive or picking up trash, like some of you have mentioned. And it usually involves a group or a person with resources that they share, voluntarily. And then the sort of at the far end of the spectrum of this is service learning, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So service learning is the blending of what is being learned through your organization such as 4-H and the hands-on experience, but it also connects that learning to some sort of service project. So for example, youth who are artistic might draw or paint a mural at a location in a community that needs beautification. So it's connecting the project that you're working on in your 4-H club with an actual community service project. So that's kind of the difference between when we talk about community service and service learning. There's a real connection that needs to be made. So how do youth develop a sense of ownership over their projects, which is key to service learning? And how does your club know what a real need is? So these are some of the questions we're going to talk about. So there are 5 basic steps in service learning. And I'd like to give credit to where all of the information is coming from today. There is a PDF file under curriculum at the National Military 4-H Partnership website. And the content of that document was primarily created by Deanna Costa, who's the Army Youth Development Specialist. And it's Enhance Your Program with Service Learning. And we're basically going to be doing a speed version of that curriculum today. Let's see, it's about 50 pages or so, and we're going to be doing it and covering most of it in about 23 slides. So I just want to give credit to where all this information is coming from. But basically, there are basic 5 steps in service learning. You're going to assess and identify needs. You're going to plan and prepare. Then the youth will experience meaningful service, and you're going to take time to do analysis and evaluation, and then finally celebration. And I would also say recognition as a part of that celebration. So this is where you can find this resource at the Military Partnership website. And if you just click there on that purple button that says Service Learning, it will download a PDF of this curriculum. And it's free. It's very, very good. So I would recommend that you bookmark that and keep it handy. Any questions so far? I'm going to stop talking for just a few seconds and let you type any questions you might have. Okay, thanks. We're going to proceed. So what I'd like to show you first of all is this kind of macro model, the service learning model. And this is a screenshot from the one of the appendix resources in that curriculum that I just mentioned. And it's really important that you kind of use this model to guide your projects. Otherwise, you know, you might find yourself getting stuck, or it's really not going to be service learning in the best way possible. So if you start on the model on the right-hand side where it says identifying the project, there's kind of a piece of the pie there that's the pre-service reflection, which includes the planning and preparation part. We're going to go into each one of these in a little bit more detail. So there's a sort of a process you can go through for identifying that project and doing some reflection to start with. And that is classified under the what category. And then the second part of that pie is the actual service project that you do, which involves an observation and analysis and lots of reflection during the service. And then the final part is now what? You know, so what? We've done this project and now what? So you're going to do some reflection after the service project has been completed and try to come up with some new understandings of things and perhaps a new application or a new way of understanding what has happened. And it looks eerily like this one. You guys have all seen this before in 4-H 101. This is our experiential learning model. And what you'll notice about the previous slide is that it looks very similar. So all of those questions that you ask during the processing part, you know, in your normal 4-H club activities, those are all going to apply. And I would say that using this experiential learning model is key to making your project successful and meaningful. So what are the benefits of service learning? There's a lot of research. You know, this is why the Cooperative Extension Service, you know, is connected to universities, so we can kind of draw on all this research that has been conducted. And what we know is that youth who engage in really well-planned, well-thought-out service learning, they perform better in school, they have a higher sort of moral aptitude, they are less likely to use drugs and alcohol, they're less likely to become pregnant as teenagers. All of those kinds of things, those social ills that we'd like to prevent, can all be prevented through meaningful service learning. So it provides character education, which all of you have to do in some sort of way for your military branches. The Army has like the 6 pillars of character education, and the Navy has an equivalent as well. So the character education that takes place during service learning, you're going to be raising the profile of your programs by doing service learning. By having, you know, your youth and staff out in the community doing stuff, it's going to get them recognized. You might even expand interest in your programs. You know, more people might come through your doors saying, hey, what are you guys doing over here? I think personally, just in my opinion, some of the best benefits are the long-lasting community connections that can be made and the developing partnerships with other agencies. So our military sites are not, you know, little islands that just work only with military populations, but creating those long-lasting connections to other agencies. And through that, the youth are developing all kinds of good values and a lot of satisfaction. And of course, there's a lot more things that are benefits of service learning. So what do you do beforehand? How do we do this? What is an important issue that you think needs to be addressed? So the pre and planning questions are really, really important. And it goes back to our initial question, right, of how do youth gain ownership over the project, which is key to successful service learning. Why is this issue important? What are other projects that already address this problem? What do you think that our group can do about it, and what kind of time are you willing to dedicate? This is covered in depth in this book, and you might want to consider some of the things like day activities, weekends, or during the week, because a lot of our school-age programs, for instance, you know, you guys only work in the after-school hours, whereas teen centers might be able to do things on weekends or on Saturdays, things like that. And I'm going to show you an example of a survey that can be done. This is a youth needs survey. This is also a resource that's included in the appendix of the curriculum that we're using today. And basically this would be something that you would just go through with your kids and say, let's rank these. Is this a minor issue, moderate, or serious in our community? And then of course, if you find something else that's not listed, you can of course put that on there. But I think that this would really help kind of narrow down some of the interest areas. I know if you just walk into a room with a bunch of teenagers and say, hey guys, what's important? What do we do? Let's do a service project. You're going to get all kinds of things, coming at you. So maybe one way to kind of narrow it down a little bit to what issues are really important is to do this kind of a survey to get a little buy-in right from the beginning. Okay, so you start with big picture. Okay, what's the issue? What's the issue that the kids have chosen? We're gonna talk a little bit about how is it that what's the level of buy-in? So the best way to sabotage yourself, so to speak, in a service project is to announce that you're going to be doing service learning. I think that probably the eyes will glaze over almost immediately. So I think you have to really package it sometimes, and starting the discussion about what's important to the kids and where they think the need is located is probably a really good way to do that. So it actually starts with their ideas. So once you've identified an issue, and that could be done using the survey that was mentioned earlier, or just having discussion groups sitting down talking story, then you're going to talk about, okay, so what do we want to do about it? Guiding them to a project area. Direct service. So I want to take a poll. If you guys can think of what this means. So what is direct service? What is indirect service? What is advocacy? And if you could just type maybe one example in the chat box of what you think each of those might be. And then we'll see what you guys come up with, and then we'll kind of define those a little further for you. So I'll just take a couple minutes and write what you think those are. Welcome to our session, Genevieve. We've just, we're taking a poll right now. We're talking about taking the service learning project from big picture to detail, and trying to think about what is direct service, what is indirect service, and what is advocacy. And if you just have an example in your mind of what one of those could be, if you could just type it in the chat box. And some of the answers that we're coming up with so far is that direct service is with the kids, yes. And Kiki's saying perhaps personal contact versus non-personal contact, or direct service is kids helping clean a park. All of those are really great examples. Direct service is working with recipients directly, so that's correct. This allows for that instant gratification as you quickly know that the people that the services have been provided for. So examples might include tutoring, or visiting an elderly home. Some other examples that I can think of, the Read to Me project is I would say is a direct service. It kind of provides that instant gratification. This is where older students, perhaps 4th or 5th grade or even older, go and read stories to younger children at the preschool level. That's a really good example. The indirect service, as Ms. Yoshino was saying, staff and chaplain communication, that's a good way. That's a good example. It's working on a project where the impact might take a little more time to see. This is indirect service. So examples might include environmental efforts, maybe poverty-related interventions. And so the project that you're working on, the impact may show in a few weeks, months, or even years. Some of the examples I can think of would be beautification projects that are slow growing, like perennial gardens or tree planting, things like that, where you might take a long time to be able to see the actual effect of it, but those efforts are still there at the beginning. The other advocacy, very good, Kiki, using your voice for a cause. That's excellent. And as Carol was saying, example of supporting cancer education. That's a really good example. Advocacy is a little more indirect as well, but it involves showcasing a real need and advocating for a proposed solution. So this might include speaking to elected officials or base leadership, notifying the community, or writing letters to businesses. This is an excellent way to use the sort of official 4-H citizenship curriculum. So there's a really good curriculum that's called Citizenship that 4-H has produced, and I would say that not only does it educate youth on the legislative process, but to do a service learning project that involves advocacy, using that curriculum would be a really good tool. So these are all really good examples, and the examples that you came up with in the beginning, such as the park cleanup and things like that, those are mostly direct service. There's other common service projects that I know programs have done, things like food drives. Those are probably considered direct service. There's there's all kinds of ways to weave these into already existing club programs. So the key that I want you to think about today as we're talking about these is the clubs that you currently have, no matter what they are, there is a service learning component just waiting to be unlocked. So if you have a cooking or a nutrition club, what kind of service learning project can you tie in to what they're already learning in that club? Or if you have an arts and crafts club, what kind of service learning can be done that involves using artistic talents and things like that? So just kind of keep those things in mind and maybe jot down some brainstorm notes as we go through this. So I think that's really the key to the success of your service learning project, is having it connect in a really clear way to what you're already doing. And then of course the processing and reflection portion of it. I want to talk for a second about some challenging service projects. These pictures tell a really big story, so I'll share a story with you. A couple of years ago, the then director at the Schofield School Age program here on Oahu had some connections with the Weinberg Village in Waimanalo. And the Weinberg Village in Waimanalo is a transitional housing village facility for families. Some are single moms, some are not, some are two-parent households, but they were basically families who had found themselves, by whatever circumstances, in a place where they were very close to being homeless, or on the other end, they had already been homeless and were trying to work their way back into more permanent housing situation. So these were housing challenged families, and the bottom left picture is a picture of their club leader, Julie, and the kids working on some planning. So she was calling around and trying to get some donations for things, and the kids were helping organize the list of things that this village might need based on their interactions and based on calling and asking them what they needed. And so the kids were very much a part of the planning process right from the beginning. It was a little messy, I would say. I got to witness some of these interactions, and there was a lot of education going on during this whole process. So it wasn't just the leader doing all of the organizing. The kids were very much a part of it. The second picture there is the kids were able to do a toy and clothing drive at their school age center, and they packed everything up in boxes on the day that they went out to the transitional housing, and so the kids actually were able to organize the boxes and put everything together and take it out there on the buses. And then this final picture of this project is they spent, I think, about a half a day out at the transitional housing facility, and instead of just kind of going and dropping off a bunch of donations that they had gathered, the kids stayed and ate lunch and played bingo with all the other kids that were living there. And I think that this was perhaps the strength of that project, was that there was this real connection made between the participants from the school age center and these kids that were living in transitional housing. They were able to see that, you know what, these kids are just like me. There's not really that much difference. They like to run around outside and play games and do the same things I like to do, and they don't have a house. So they were really able to process out a lot of things, a lot of preconceived notions about homelessness and judgments and things that that we saw, was happening with the kids at the school age programs. I think this is a really, really good example of how a service project can really be very impactful in the lives of the young people. Some lessons learned, though, from this project that we saw happen. You do want to do a skills inventory as you plan. What's a skills inventory, right? So it's basically taking stock of what people can do. So if somebody's really good at talking on the phone, or if someone's really good at organizing, or someone's really good at doing math, or maybe someone's just wants to be behind the scenes and just pack up the boxes. What do people actually really want to do during their service project? And perhaps, I want to encourage you to, push kids, a little bit to maybe go beyond their comfort zone, but also balancing that with taking into consideration that you're going to have some very, very shy kids who may not want to interact with strangers, or on the other hand, you're going to have some really outgoing kids who are natural leaders. Talking to other people who have done the work that you want to do. This is really crucial because there's no need to reinvent the wheel. In this particular project that I'm sharing with you, they did that. They talked to people who had done work at this program. They found out what was actually needed. They didn't just provide a bunch of stuff that wasn't needed. They found out the ages of the kids, for instance, and that there were babies, there, and so they maybe needed some baby supplies, or, those kinds of things. So just find out what's been done before. Dividing tasks so that everyone has a job. You don't want, as a leader, you don't want to be in a position where your service project that you want to do with your kids turns into your nightmare because there's nobody doing anything on it except for you. So this is really, really important, dividing those tasks up so that everyone has something to do. Also, keep a log or a record of all the pieces of the project, which includes, the names and contact details for important people. There's a couple reasons for this. First of all, you want to have evidence that you've done this amazing project. You want to get sort of credit from those who care, and from those who are watching, like your commanders and your supervisors and those kinds of people. Of course, you want to get credit. But the other reason is so that in the future, someone might be able to recreate this project. I would say that was a fatal flaw of this particular project that I've shared with you just now, is that that director and leader is now gone, and so it's very hard to recreate the project that she did, which I think was a really good one, and it could have been duplicated every year. As the transient nature of the transitional housing people change, and also as our military population changes, redoing a project every year was definitely a viable option if we knew how to set that program up. Stick to a project that's age appropriate. There was a few times along different service projects when I've kind of had to ask, like, do you really want to try to process this, these issues with a group of kindergartners, for instance? Talking about homelessness and talking about poverty, talking about drug addiction or mental health issues, the things that lead to homelessness or lead to some of these other social problems. Those are complicated issues, and you want to be careful just who you're talking with about it. And if you want to do service projects with younger kids, to perhaps think about keeping them a little simpler, or maybe working with animal groups or environmental things or something like that aren't quite so complicated to understand. And then always have a backup plan. If weather was going to be, junk one day and your service project requires that you be outside, then, just definitely have a backup plan. And I've underlined to prepare youth with training, resources, and guidance. This is really, really crucial, that when you're working with kids and you're going to do a service project, that they get all the training they need to be successful. You don't want to throw kids under the bus. We want to set them up to succeed. We do not want to set them up to feel shame or feel embarrassed or feel like they didn't know what they were doing. So it's really important to provide them with those resources beforehand. And then also just to process at every single opportunity that you have. How's it going? We're going to talk a little bit about more specific questions on that, but I want to pause for just a second and let you guys type any questions you might have so far into the chat box. I'll stop talking for a second. I see some folks typing, but I haven't seen any messages pop up in the chat box yet. So I'm thinking maybe you are shy to ask a question, or maybe you just haven't fully formed the question yet. So I'm gonna move forward, and please raise your hand or type a question if you want me to stop. I want to talk for a second about long-term relationships. Monogamy, if you will. No, I'm just kidding. Long-term relationships with stakeholders and with community agencies. This picture is a picture of a bunch of kids from the Kwajalein School-Age Center working with a school on their neighbor atoll of Ebi. So if anybody knows anything about the Marshall Islands, I'll give you a quick history. The Marshall Islands are probably one of the poorest spots in the Pacific. They have one of the poorest education systems in the Pacific. And Kwajalein Atoll, which is primarily a U.S. Army base, and there's a whole lot of contractors that live there. They can travel by ferry from Kwajalein to the closest atoll is Ebi, and it's like a world apart. So the youth from Kwajalein School-Age Center have a long-term relationship with the school on Ebi, and they've done many, many service projects over there. And this photo is just one of the staff and youth working on a native plant garden. And they've also done service projects that involve school supplies, getting books, reading to youth, some cooking and nutrition things. So they've developed a long-term relationship with this school, and it's really beneficial to the youth on Kwaj who get to see over the course of the many years that they live there all the different service projects. I'm just reading Carol's message that she wrote in the chat box, that processing with the youth through the whole project is important for youth to understand needs and develop skills, and I couldn't agree more. I think that is the key to this service learning process, and it's a real defining difference between just doing volunteer work or just doing community service and engaging in true service learning. Engaging in that reflection process is the key to that. And I would like to see, in terms of long-term relationships with your stakeholders and with the folks in your communities, I would love to see some more long-term relationships developed with military 4-H programs and community, agencies wherever you are. I think it would be really, really good for everyone, because when you develop those long-term relationships, you're always going to have new kids coming through your door. That service project for them is never going to get old. It's always going to be new. But over time, you perfect the art, you perfect the logistics and the planning and all the things that kind of can go messy in a service project. Those things get better over time. So I think it would be really great to see some long-term relationships developed. I'm going to do another quick poll for you. So what is an agency or a community partner that you can think of to create a long-term relationship for service learning? These are all really good ones. Schools, animal shelters, Chaplain, Parks and Recreation. Those are all really good examples of agencies that you can create a long-term relationship with. My head goes immediately to the animal shelter, and the Schofield the Schofield MST Middle School Teen Program here on Oahu. Let's see, about I want to say 3 years now they've done different kinds of drives for the Hawaii Humane Society. So they've done blanket and towel drives, they've done animal food drives. I think about 2 years ago they went down and did like a dog walkathon with a group of teenagers. So it's a really good relationship that they have. And I think that what long-term relationships can do is it creates an atmosphere of peer pressure, a positive peer pressure among the youth and staff. So if you get a group of kids that does a really awesome service project and they love it, they're going to talk about it. And they're going to talk about it to the new kids who come in, and they're going to talk about it to their parents, they're going to talk about it to their friends. And pretty soon, people are going to start saying, hey, when are we going to do that thing again? When are we going to do that project again like we did last year? So those are some really good reasons to create those long-term relationships with agencies and community partners. Another consideration is cultural-based learning. This photo was taken at one of the ahalelos. Ahalelo in Hawaiian means to gather or to get together and talk. And it's a teen conference, a teen 4-H conference that's held every year on Oahu. And one of the service projects that they took part in a couple of years ago was working in this lo'i, or taro patch, here at the university. And this place is very beautiful and it's very sacred, and it was one of the best parts of the entire conference, I think. The kids just left there with a whole new kind of sense of food security and food sustainability and cultural awareness and appreciation. And what you see here in this picture is one of the leaders who takes care of the lo'i was explaining to all of the youth how we were going to be planting the new kalo or taro in the lo'i. And it was a beautiful day, and everyone got really dirty and muddy. And it's another picture of them doing this project. In the top left, they're preparing the lo'i for planting by basically mashing it and turning the mud and the soil. And then what you see where they're bent over is how they plant it in rows. And so they have this guide, and everyone gets a plant and they have to put it in the water. And these were 4 military kids who had never done anything like this before. And they were just really changed and really awed by this whole process. And that service project, even though it was short-term, it was a one-day project, there was so much learning and so much processing and cultural appreciation that took place. It became the thing that all the kids talked about the whole rest of the conference. And in fact, a year later, when I visited the Teen Center, the first thing that one of the kids said to me was, hey, you remember when we were down there and we planted the taro? It was so cool. I mean, they were still jazzed about it a year later. So these kinds of short-term projects can be really meaningful too, if planned and done really well. So long-term projects, short-term projects, it's all in the planning. It's all in how you formulate it, and really, really about the processing. So another poll for you. So what's a short-term service learning project that you have done or you think you might be able to do in the near future? That's a really good one. Who are you? You're labeled 4-H. Could you just type in the chat box which program you are, who you are? I'd love to know who I'm talking to. But that's a really good example of preparing a meal for a homeless shelter, or even serving one that's already been made. There's a great group of people here on Oahu called Street Angels, and that's exactly what they do once a week. It's sort of a network of people who volunteer to prepare a vegetarian dish, and then we serve it in parks. And really good examples. Clean a park or play area, really good example. Lunch at the orphanage, a food drive to a chapel. These are really good examples of short-term projects that could potentially have a really deep impact on someone, especially I think the direct service stuff of preparing food or cleaning a park or play area. A little story to tell you about cleaning up a park. One of the citizenship clubs at one of the school age programs here, they have these little badges they wear, and this is kind of a side note too, but if you're out doing a service project, it's really useful to have some identifying information on you. So whether it's a t-shirt or a badge that the kids make or something, but something that they can identify themselves and create that sense of belonging with the group is really important. The Citizenship Club at Schofield School Age last year, one of their last projects of the year was that they went over to a park that was nearby, and they just took some bags and basically were going to clean up trash around the park. And one of the kids had brought it up. They had noticed that when they went home that the park was kind of junky. There was trash laying everywhere and stuff, and so they were over there cleaning it up. And some other kids that weren't part of their group were at the park, and they kind of started rough housing and kind of running around and not playing safely. And the kids that were part of the Citizenship Club, they said, hey, that's not safe. You shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be acting that way. And we're trying to clean up the park here. And so they got into this interesting dialogue. And of course their leader was there guiding them too. But they said, hey, what are you guys doing? What are your badges? What's this 4-H Citizenship Club? What are you guys doing? And so then they started telling them, oh, we're here, we're cleaning up the park. This is part of our community service. It's part of our school age program. You should come hang out with us. And it was just a really interesting exchange because you get this kind of percolating out of ideas and that pay it forward idea. So they were able to impact this other group of kids and perhaps pull some more interest into their club program just because they were identifying themselves. And it was a short-term project. So some specifics about processing. So how you process something really matters. As you go, questions. So as you're doing the community or service learning project, asking as you're going, so how's it going? What new things are you learning? Have you been surprised by anything so far? How are you feeling right now? So these questions do a couple of things. They serve to keep kids thinking, but also to keep them energized and engaged in whatever they're doing. So especially if you get a kid, or maybe usually in the case where I've seen, it's usually 2 or 3 kids who are kind of, being yahoos over in the corner and not doing anything or not participating in the project. You can kind of draw them in with these processing questions. Hey, what are you guys doing? How are you feeling about this project? And as much as you can to try and record these reflections in writing or some way digitally to serve as evidence of your projects. And this will serve you very, very well. Those of you who have just gone through accreditation this year or who will be going through it next year, these kinds of things that you keep evidence of in your service learning projects are huge. So I just want to emphasize that take pictures and record those reflections. Those things are going to really serve your programs very, very well. And we love to see them too, but more importantly for you guys to get credit for the good work that you do and for the awesome service projects that you're engaging in. After the experience, kind of a different set of questions. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do this, and on the next slide is a way to kind of do some creative reflection, but some really simple things to ask. So what was the most rewarding part of this, or what was the most difficult part? How did the information or skills that you learned help you during this project? So this is a really good way to tie in what your club work has already been to what your service project is. So if you've been doing some cooking things or improving their skills in that way, and then you go and you decide you're going to cook a meal or prepare a meal at the homeless shelter, you can ask them, so how did the information we learned in our club actually help you today? And hopefully they're going to say things like, oh, I'm so glad we talked about food safety and washing our hands and temperatures of meats and vegetables and all those kinds of things that you have talked about in your cooking clubs. What issues did you experience, or what issues did you experience that did this make you think about? So did this make you think about something differently? Did it make you change your attitude? How do you think that we as a group can have more of an impact on this issue? And what might you do differently next time if you were planning a different project or the same one over again? And finally, and probably the most important, is how do you think you're a different person because of this experience? I think those are really, really important questions to ask our young people as we go through these service learning projects. There's also some really cool creative ways to do reflection, which I personally love. A snapshot in time. So these are outlined in the book that I mentioned earlier too, so they're kind of explained in more detail. But you know, pretend that all the pictures you took, you know, of all those many weeks of planning or several hours of project they all disappeared. So you only had to have one picture to describe what happened. So what's your snapshot in time? Maybe you have the kids sculpt something out of clay that describes how they felt or how they experienced. Creating a button or a bumper sticker to share with the world what your service project was. They can write poems, songs, skits, maybe take quotations from people who are involved. That's a really good way to put kids in the driver's seat, is to go around and get quotes from people who were involved. You know, put them with the little interviewer hats on with their little press badges and clipboards and have them go around and interview people. And of course you need to evaluate your program. And I feel that most of the time when people see the word evaluate, they're like, oh God, I don't want to evaluate. That word brings up all sorts of unpleasant feelings. But there's a lot of ways to do this, and some really creative ways to do it. And the first way is to use the feedback from your reflection sessions. So this is another reason for you to capture and record what those reflection sessions say, either in writing or digitally recording them somehow, because this is going to help you evaluate. You can use a survey at the end, or you can do interviews. And you should ideally include any external partners too. Okay, so if you do something, you know, at an animal shelter, or you do something with Parks and Recreation, that you try to include them in your evaluation of the program. And it might just be a simple questionnaire. So here's an example. This is from the appendix of the Service Learning Guide, and I have included the web address there at the bottom for you. You'll find it under curriculum. But this is a sample questionnaire for adult chaperones and community partners. And just some ideas, right? So you're asking them to say the outcomes they expected, and if they've improved, or what extent did the participants achieve these outcomes? Were there any unanticipated outcomes, any surprises? What are the strengths? What ways can it be improved? These are very simple questionnaires for those folks who are participating in your projects, and it can really, really give you a lot of information about where your projects need to go. I'm going to stop for a second, let you guys type any questions you might have into the box about processing the questions or evaluating your projects, or anything that you have up to this point. Okay, no questions yet. The final step, number 5, is to celebrate your project. So this might seem a little funny. Why would you celebrate something that you've just done for somebody else? But I think it's really, really important to celebrate your projects. It does two things. It says thank you to those people who helped to organize it, including the youth, and it recognizes good work done. And I can't think of one single person who would not want to be recognized for their hard work and their good work. So it's really important to recognize people's work. This picture here is, it was a mini service project that we did a couple of years ago, and it involved both middle school teen and school age. The teenagers sort of helped and supervised the younger kids to make little potted plant gardens, which then got distributed around the base to beautify the reception areas of various offices. It was a very simple project, but I think that they felt really good about it. You know, they get to walk into, you know, like the school liaison office, or the, you know, the office where they, you know, get your hearing checked or whatever, you know, various kinds of administrative offices on base, and say, oh, you know, we're bringing you a plant. to beautify your space. And they had little cards inside that said, made by the Schofield School Age Gardening Club. And it was a fun project. And so here's the teenager who was supervising, and recognizing them publicly in this particular case happened right at the end of the day. We recognized all the kids who came out to help, and we gave them all certificates for participation. And it can be as simple as that. Be just at the end of the day if that's all you have. You could also make a photo book or an online gallery, share with others. You can make a poster and hang it up, have a mini party. The sky's the limit. How are you going to celebrate your project? How are you going to celebrate your work and say thank you and to recognize the stuff that the kids have done? That's really up to you, and it's up to them. So, but it is an important part of the process, and it serves as culmination. So a lot of the program planning things that we ask you guys to do in terms of your program plan, we ask you for a program plan, which is a snapshot of your club work. We ask you for lesson plans, and we ask you for within that program plan or lessons, what's your culmination activity? What is it that you're going to do to signify the end of the season or the end of club work, or maybe just taking a break? I mean, a lot of the clubs that we know, they go year-round. So like for instance, Kwajalein, they do their 4-H clubs year-round and they have service projects going on all the time, but they still, at the end of each kind of larger project, they take a little time to have a pizza party or just eat some junk food. As the cooking club, makes really healthy food all the time, and then they say, okay, we're just going to have a day where we make tacos and not worry about the nutritional content. So working those kinds of plans into your program plan is really important, and making that connection between what is my club doing, what's my snapshot, what are my overall goals, and then how can I incorporate service learning into this? This is going to be where you're going to find real success, by connecting those two things. So how are we going to get started? There's a lot of ideas out there. You have so many resources at your fingertips that I really hope you don't go and spend tons of time researching service projects, because there's really just so much that you could do. My hope for you is that what you'll do is start with your kids, that you'll start by asking them, what's an issue you're concerned about, and what do you want to do about it? And there's a lot of ideas. Woodworking projects, if you have that kind of equipment, animal projects like we mentioned earlier, foods and nutrition. There are safety things that can be done. You could visit hospitals, daycares or preschools, homeless shelters. There are lots of environmental things you can do that are both simple and complex. Tourism, this is one that a lot of people don't think about, but showing people around is a really good service project. Serving as a docent or a tour guide can be a really good project to do. Elder care, and then of course neighborhoods and schools. So really the sky is the limit. You guys can think about service learning holistically, which is what I hope you do, and consider how to incorporate it into the club that you already have. And work from where you're at, and start with the kids. Start with where they are and what they are interested in. So if you have any questions or comments, I would love to see them in the chat box right now. If you have any suggestions for a service project for somebody else, or something that worked really well, if we were doing this face-to-face, we would have a fantastic discussion about service projects that you've done or that you want to do, or something you've been thinking about. You can type those in the chat box and share them with the other folks that are here right now. And that'll pretty much wrap it up from my end, but please look for the evaluation of this webinar. I'll be sending it out later today. This photo that's on this page, it's actually an activity that you can do to find out what service projects people are into or what they have done. And you basically just write down your ideas for service on a hand, and you post it up on a board like this. And this was an activity that we did with a bunch of 4-H leaders several years ago during a service learning face-to-face training. So we were able to capture all of those ideas and all of that energy. That's what this picture represents. So I hope that you'll write questions in the Thank you, Raymond. Yes, that's funny, Carol. I know we were just talking about how my name says Raymond Uchida, and I should explain that before the webinar even starts. But Raymond Uchida is our Oahu County Administrator, and it's his account that I work off of. So yeah, I'm not Ray. He's actually out sick today, I think. I heard him talking earlier, but yeah, that's why I use Ray's account. So please type any questions you might have in the chat box, and thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it, and please email me any feedback you want, or you can type it on the evaluations I'll be sending out later. Thanks a lot, folks.